This is much more than the 6 people I was anticipating yesterday. Nice. Okay. Unlike these 2 previous papers, which were serious and getting in there, this is really just a bit of fun. I put together this thing called the distress index. Now, why in the world would I do something like that? Well, we've all heard of the misery index, right? And that's just simply inflation plus unemployment. And it was used as a political tool to say, aren't the Carter years just horrible and awful? And last fall, Mike Van Winkle of FEE, Foundation for Economic Education, said, hey, what we need is a new index, something to update the misery index. And he said, well, it should be simple. It should be using existing data, and we want something that anyone could basically put together, so it shouldn't be heavily manipulated by all that econometric type stuff, right? Because look, the misery index was just inflation plus unemployment, okay? So, since this is business cycle theory too, I figure I should show what a business cycle is. And we see that we've got our peaks and recessions and recovery and peak, and the Austrian cycle theory is really, it's an explanation of this guy right here. It's an explanation of the upper turning point. And so when I put together the index here, I noticed that there was some strong correlation, but if you look at the data, or I'm sorry, if you look at the newspapers, they're only talking about recession, right? Well, are we in a recession? Well, December 2007 was the beginning of the recession. Okay, fine. And then, June of 2009, we're out of the recession. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means we're here. That's what it means. It means we've hit rock bottom and we're starting to come up. Well, that's still bad, right? So I want to talk about the bad, right? I want to talk about this, right? The stuff underneath, the under the trend part. So the distress index isn't really trying to say, are we in a recession? It's, are economic times bad? Are we in distress? So the goal is to make it simple. Okay, the distress index uses no more than a handful of statistics, and they're chosen because they're widely known, widely recognized, and pretty uncontroversial. And all the data is collected from the normal places from the federal government. So if you go online, you'll see a little thing like this, and you can get that widget. So it says get this widget, and then you can put it in your own web page and popularize it. And basically, it's important to emphasize that no statistic will ever fully articulate what's happening in the real economy. The real economy is made up of living, breathing, planning, acting individuals. Statistics are simply an abstraction, as such, imperfect. Nevertheless, this index can have some value. Why? Well, first, it gives us a tool to help us interpret what the media and the government are telling us about the economy, right? If we have a high distress number, we're out of the recession. Yeah, but we're really hurting still. I think that's more significant. And then secondly, and Mike and I say, we hope it'll give us a voice to the taxpayer and the frustrating conditions he is enduring these days. The hope is that the index will keep pressure on policymakers and opinion leaders to make decisions that improve the economy rather than distressing it further. And that's a big hope, right? Are politicians really going to listen? Oh, yeah, no, probably not. But maybe, we'll see. Okay, so here it is. Here's what the distress index looks like. We'll get to the guts in a little bit. So, after a cursory historical analysis on the index, we see that the results were fairly correlated with recessions, right? These are the yellow lines. The chart shows that the index from 1967, with the recessions being highlighted, there seems to be at least a superficial correlation of the index breaking above 47 that says, yep, we're in deep trouble. In most cases, the index appears to lead the recession's beginning and end, which would seem to indicate that the index is actually has a little bit of predictive power, but that's not really what it's supposed to be doing. Okay, so let's focus in on more modern times. And so here's 1996, and here's the recession. So I've ended it in June, and it says, yeah, we're slowly getting better, but things are still pretty bad. Things are still pretty bad. So that brings me to some distressingly fun facts. First of all, the overall average is just under 44 when we're in a recession and when we're not in a recession. So there's a swing there. The president by time period, we could see that Carter was averaging about 46, in the 70s about a 44. Reagan, not much better. Not much better. I mean, if you remember under Reagan, unemployment was 7% consistently, 6 and 7%. Under George Herbert Walker Bush, it's coming down, things are improving. And you can see the 90s were actually quite a great time. And I would attribute this to the technological revolution, the invention of, the unleashing of the internet and all of the costs coming down as a result of it. And then George W. Bush, we're back up at 46, and Obama's at 59.1. So, they're just distressingly fun facts. Okay. So what are the components? What makes this up? Well, there are 5 things. First, unemployment. Okay, unemployment. CPI, right? And just get that from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Then we have gross domestic product, and people can argue, should we use GDP? Is it really? But what we're going for is something that people tend to recognize. Okay, now here we have total capacity utilization. Now, usually, what this is doing is it's calculating the percentage of how much capacity is being utilized. And what we want to do is we want to take the reverse of that. So we subtract 1. So if there's total capacity utilization that's 70%, then what we're doing is we're using 30%. That's what our index is using. And then we have household financial obligations as a percent of disposable personal income. That's a long title. And basically what that is a measure intended to gauge the ability of individuals to participate in the consumer economy. How much debt do we have? And here's what the different components look like. So at the top here's our distress index, and you can see the others. Also, we're doing the negative of GDP, because if GDP is going up, right, then we're less distressed, right? So we flip that around. And people then asked, well, shouldn't you use maybe some other things? And why not use PCE, personal consumption expenditure, instead of CPI? So I looked into that, and the result was not much difference. And then they said, well, maybe you should use monthly GDP numbers from eForecasting.com. And so I plugged that in and see, and basically all it did was just create a whole bunch of extra noise. It didn't add anything extra. They said, well, maybe you should use real private fixed investment instead of GDP, right? Because that's what you Austrians care about is capital structure. And so maybe we should look at investment. So I put that in there, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Then one of my friends, for those of you who are Auburn people, Luis DePico, said, well, maybe you should do the 12-month deviation from the 12-month mean. And I say, thanks, Luis. So I put that in, and again, it didn't really improve the fit at all. It didn't really change anything. And so overall, the results were slight statistical improvements, but the loss was in the simplicity of the index or the recognition of the statistics. Okay, so here's all the different modifications that I threw in, and basically they're all moving basically the same. The one that I do want to focus in on is this yellow one here, which is where I use real private fixed investment, and it looks like this. This is instead of GDP, it's using real private fixed investment. And what do we get? Well, we get much larger swings. We get much bigger amplitudes. But basically it tracks the same. So what would be more appealing to the average guy on the street, real private fixed investment or GDP? We stuck with GDP. So here's Distressingly Fun Facts Part 2. And the ones in red, these guys over here, are the numbers if we put real private fixed investment instead of GDP. And you can see it tracks about the same, right? I mean, you just have larger amplitudes, but basically the numbers line up. Although in this one we see that Carter is actually better than Reagan and George Herbert Walker Bush here, which I thought kind of interesting, and that the 70s were actually better than the 80s, which I found interesting as well. But then, okay, so is this something that people are going to be able to run huge econometric statistics? Well, I don't know, maybe. I mean, if you want. So where can you get more of this? You're like, yeah, I got to get this distress index stuff. Well, the FEE website has this at distress-index, and there's a data sheet that we put together. So if you want all of the data, you can just download it and run your own regressions and do your own checking and such. And you can get the widget from fee.org. And you can email me, and if you want to do something, or if you use it as part of your forecasting tool, let me know. And if you have improvements or suggestions, email me, and it'll be extra super fun. So that's my index.